Hey everybody, welcome to the City of Raleigh Museum. I'm your host on Raleigh's Coolest Attic, Ernest Dollar, and today I've chosen part of some of my favorite objects from the museum's collection, some of our old photography. Now I love photography. I'm a 19th century photography guy. I love shooting photographs. I love looking at the stories behind photographs. So today I've pulled some of our most wonderful and most mysterious photographs to share with you, to talk about how we date photographs, look at some of the evidence in the photographs, and some of the stories behind the photographs. So I hope you'll stay with us today as we kind of explore Raleigh's photographic heritage.
Hart, what's going on?
I'm leaving.
Why? What did I do?
Not enough. You constantly ignore me. You barely eat anything healthy. You're half as active as you used to be. The pressure is just too much. I quit.
Okay, I get it. I'll do better. Just please, don't leave.
Okay. But remember, if I go, you go.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you. Uncontrolled high blood pressure could lead to stroke, heart attack, or death. Get yours to a healthy range before it's too late.
So the first photograph I wanted to talk to you about today is this one. And this is in sad, sad shape. As you can tell, in the City of Raleigh Museum's collection, we have about 500,000 images. A lot of those are negatives, some of those are hard images, and some of those are in really bad shape, like this one. And sadly, we don't know very much about this image, but it's beautiful. It's part of a band somewhere in Raleigh. And as you can see, it has been ripped straight down the middle. So to repair this would take quite a bit of work on part of photo conservators to somehow try to put this back together. And again, we don't know very much about it. But looking at this image this morning, there are two clues which kind of give away at least when this image was shot and who this band might be. So taking a very, very close look on the hats of each of the band members is simply the initials, NCSB. And I suspect that stands for the North Carolina State Band. And if you look very, very, very far down here in the corner is the stamp of the photographic studio that made it. So right in the corner you can see very close up that it's got a stamp of Wharton and Tyree Studios. Now, going to the internet and consulting some sources, it turns out that this is the studio of Cyrus B. Wharton and Manly W. Tyree, who ran a studio here in Raleigh at 119 Fayetteville Street. Now, they were in operation from 1887 to about 1919, so this at least gives us a ballpark estimate of when this image was shot. So a little more research to find out where it was shot, and then trying to check some more sources, possibly with North Carolina State University. We'll be able to tell when and who these band members were. Now our next image is another mysterious image here we have in the museum. It's in a little better shape, but still kind of rough. You can see where it's been pulled out of a frame at some point. And again, it shows another group shot of people who we don't know who they are. But there are some clues. Now each of these folks in this picture have who they are written on their hats as well. But again, we have to get some pretty high power microscope to get in to sort of read those. But there are a couple of clues. Each of them are in a uniform. They've got, looks like keys. But one in particular reveals a little bit about who he was. And if you look at this individual right up here, you'll see he's got a small change giver on his belt. So I suspect these might have been trolley drivers in Raleigh in the late 19th century who would have passengers and sell tickets and give change through this change belt. So again, we'll have to compare this to other photographs of any other known trolley drivers or bus drivers throughout the city to figure out who this group is and when it was shot. So this leads me to my bit of advice for all of you out there who have old photographs or any family photographs. Please, for all of us and for future generations, please write who they are on the back. We would greatly appreciate it. This is our last unknown image in the collection. And we we can date this photograph by two ways, specifically by the size and what is written on the back. Now, this type of photograph is what we call a carte de visite, and it was very popular starting around the Civil War in the 1860s and was replaced by the end of the 1870s by another photographic format called cabinet cards. So certainly by the size of this, we can tell that this is sometime maybe around the Civil War, probably a bit after. We don't know who it is, but one of the things that we can determine is if we turn it over, we look on the back, the photographer who made this image stamped who he was and where his studio was. And we're very fortunate because this photographer is J.W. Watson, perhaps one of the most prolific photographers in Raleigh and possibly in North Carolina. And he ran his shop on Fayetteville Street. So he ran his photography shop on up until probably 1889. So looking at the size of the card, who shot it, and the records on J.W. Watson leads us to believe that this image is probably from the immediately post-Civil War period. But again, it's a wonderful shape, beautiful card, identified photographer, but sadly, we don't know who it is. So the next image I wanted to show you is perhaps one of the most famous houses in Raleigh. Now, photographs we have in the museum's collection not only show people, but they give us a great opportunity to look at places in Raleigh that in the past. And certainly, no other house symbolizes Raleigh than this. And this is a very, very early image of the Joel Lane house. And Joel Lane, as we all know, sold those 1,000 acres to establish the state capital here in Raleigh. So Joel Lane's house is now a historic site in Raleigh that you can go and visit. The house has moved around a little bit, but this image dates probably to the turn of the century. And you can see where the house is being lived in, but this image has some damage to it. It's got lots of scrapes and scratches across it. But to have this early document of one of Raleigh's most famous houses is an exceptionally great artifact for us to have here in the museum to show Raleigh, its early history, and how it's grown and ebbed over the years. So we talked about photographs being able to tell us about place. And this is a museum that showed the interior of many of Raleigh's stores. So this is the Royster Candy Store, which was right here on 207 Fayetteville Street in Raleigh. Now this image was taken probably around 1920 and just gives us a great example of what the candy store looked like. And of course, the Royster family is quite important. One member of that family, Vermont, Connecticut Royster, went on to become probably one of America's most influential journalists, as he was the editor of the Wall Street Journal. So you can see all of the candy in the bins throughout the store. And fortunately, this image has been identified because somebody had the foresight to write down who was in this image. So this is a great image that's in the collection of the City of Raleigh Museum for a couple of reasons. Not only do we know where this image was taken, but whoever donated it to the museum had the foresight to write down who exactly these people were. So we know that this is Miss Minnie Johnson, the sales lady. Here we have Vermont, Connecticut Royster, the owner. We have one unknown individual, and then we have Vermont's cousin, Wisconsin, Illinois Royster. Now the great thing about the Royster family, that they all have state names. So out of 8 children, they had these wonderfully creative names. So there was Iowa, Michigan Royster. There was Wisconsin, Illinois Royster. Vermont, Connecticut Royster. Oregon, Minnesota Royster. Louisiana, Maryland Royster, and that was a female. And her sister, Virginia Caroline Royster. So certainly the entire Royster family, you did not forget their names. But again, we're so thankful to have this image in the City of Raleigh Museum. So we started off looking at a lot of our unknown images in our collection, and I wanted to end today's show by talking about one image that we know quite a lot about. And it allows us to tell an incredible story about this woman. Now this is Karina Priscilla LeMay Powell, and she was born in 1838 and died in 1882. So looking at this image, you would think it was a drawing, but it's not quite a drawing. So if you think about early photography, it was very small, like the carte de visite we saw. And it only took time for photographers to learn to enlarge their images. So this is an early enlargement of a much earlier picture, because this probably dates to about the 1880s or 1890s. So after Karinia died, this image was probably made from an early image of her, because she would have been a very old woman when she died. But of course, looking at this image, she's fairly young. So we can tell by her dress and her hairstyle that this image was probably taken just before the American Civil War in the 1860s. So when Hoover donated this picture, it included the entire family history. So we learned about the birth of her children, her marriage, the tragic death of 2 of her children due to scarlet fever in the American Civil War, to her contentious divorce with her husband in 1868. So whenever we can talk about putting together an exhibit or telling the story of Raleigh, having this image, identified image, and the story behind it really allows us to bring it to life, to tell that history, to make sure her story goes on for the next generation. So I hope you'll come visit the City of Raleigh Museum and help us explore many of our images that we have to share here for Raleigh's history. So for the City of Raleigh Museum, I'm Ernest Dollar. Thanks for watching.